Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Shama Sundar Radha Shama Sundar Radhe Radhe. Jaya Krishna Balaram, Jaya Krishna Balaram, Jaya Krishna Balaram, Jaya Krishna Balaram. Jaya Gaura Jaya Gaura Nitai, Jaya Gaura Nitai, Jaya Gaura Nitai. Hari Bol. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol. Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Vancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhu bhayevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Well, something worth doing is worth doing again. Srila Prabhupada's shoes. I love this pastime, so I'm going to do this one again. So we have the continuity. There's a program going on. It's in Montreal. And a very interesting Indian man came, and here we go. He appeared to scan the pairs and then pick up the Swami's shoes that curled up a little at the toe. I was puzzled. They came here, by the way, for the 50th anniversary. So those shoes they came to Vrindavan so we could get their darshan and charan spas of Srila Prabhupada's. Those special shoes, they're in New York, Brooklyn. So it says, the white shoes that curled up a little at the toe. I was puzzled. What was he doing with the Swami's shoes? Looking straight at the Swami, he banged the shoes together sideways 2 or 3 times. A cloud of dust rose and formed a puffball and then faded into the air as it fell to the floor. The Swami broke into a huge smile and nodded enthusiastically at the man who grinned toothlessly back at him. The man took off his own shoes and sat on the floor close to the Swami's seat. But while everyone else silently watched, the Swami and the man conversed in Hindi for a few minutes. I didn't understand what had just happened between them, but I assumed it involved something to do with Vedic etiquette of some kind. I knew it was traditional for a holy man's shoes to be respected. It was a gesture of humility to touch them, although I wouldn't have dared to. So this is like the first introduction to Pada Sevana. It's like we don't know these 9 processes of devotional service. So we're getting firsthand somebody who knows. Like when we were in grade school, we had a little chore to bang the chalk, the erasers together to get all the chalk dust out of it. So, that's something we would be familiar with. And to serve Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet to get all the dust off of it, he was doing this Pada Sevana. Very, very intimate devotional service to be able to do that. Very, very fortunate for him to do that.
Mataji?
Yes.
Who is that devotee?
That's Hansa Rupa. He's in Brooklyn. Yeah. So he transported the shoes here so we could get darshan for the 50th anniversary. Just before midnight, a group of Gujarati women appeared carrying sticks and dressed identically in red sequin saris. I thought they looked like a soccer team. Who are they? I asked a man standing next to me. What are the sticks for? They are dancers. We don't know anything. We're culturally ignorant. Can you imagine? We don't know. Even it might be because I remember some of the things, they were so comfortable, even though it was the first time I was experiencing these things. I felt so like at home, even though I had never seen stick dancing or I'd never seen some of these things. It was still very comfortable for me because here we are, we're Westerners, but most likely we were not in our previous life. We're like fish out of water in the Western world, and trying. My actual situation during this period was trying to find my people. Literally, we were trying to find my people. You have no idea how lucky you are to be born in India, in Varsha, a holy place. It's so easy. There your people are everywhere, and everyone knows Krishna. Here, it was like you're the unusual person, very unusual person who's even heard the name Krishna, except for after Prabhupada got to the United States and then Kirtan was going on in every town and village. Then things changed, but still, how fortunate you are to be born into this culture where it's not, where we had to search for our people, our culture. We were lacking. We didn't, we were like bereft of being comfortable. And I know for some time, whenever I would get back from India and I would start to miss Indian culture, I would just have to take a trip to Little India, like Islan Rawe, just to be around, And here you are, you're in it. You don't even know how lucky you are. So I wondered what the Swami would say about choreographed dancing in the temple. In general, he was very traditional, so I doubted he would approve. But when the Swami saw them, he beckoned for them to come forward. One woman plugged in a small cassette player and pressed the play button. A melodious Gujarati song rang out in the temple, and the women began to dance in graceful, symmetrical movements, touching their sticks together as they whirled past one another. Their red dresses rustled as they rose and fell in small waves. The Swami nodded to the beat of the music and smiled through the whole 15-minute performance. Very good. Thank you very much, he exclaimed at the end. The sequined women gathered around the seat. They had an animated group conversation in Hindi until it was time for the midnight arti ceremony. The room was filled to capacity, mostly by Indian guests dressed in all their finery, heavily jeweled saris, dripping gold jewelry, and opulent Punjabi outfits. The singing of 100 throats filled the candlelit room as the deity curtains opened for the arti. The Swami stood before the altar to perform the ceremony. Holding 3 incense sticks in his right hand, he made big clockwise circles to offer the incense to the deities. In his left hand, he rang a small silver bell. The Swami offered other articles, a burning cotton wick dipped in clarified butter, sitting in a small bronze holder, water in a conch shell, a handkerchief, fresh flowers, a yak tail fan, and a peacock feather fan, and then blew the 3 long blasts on a conch shell to indicate the end of the ceremony. Everyone took their places, sitting in parallel lines on the temple floor. After a long day of fasting, it was finally time to serve the beautiful Janmashtami feast, which included Nanda Kishore's celebrated chapatis. And in those days, we were poor, but boy, did we have the feasts. Remember that? The feasts were unbelievable. We learned how to make gulabs, and we learned how to make all these things, rasgula. And we would just be spending like a week getting all ready, geared up to do the feast. And everybody in the temple room would go into the kitchen and cook in different shifts and everything. But we would try to get 108 preparations. And we were just a little group. But we were so fired up about this process. And the other thing was, the celebration of being able to serve Krishna through cooking as a seva, as a devotional seva. This was not, we didn't know this. You know, at best we would say a little grace before we ate a meal. That was at best. But Prabhupada, he taught us the art of every single thing we do, no matter what it is. Whatever we do it for Krishna. That was a completely unique conception. Completely unique conception. It was missing in our lives. He taught us even if we got new cloth, we offered it to the deities first before everything we had was prasad. There wasn't anything on us that wasn't already offered to Krishna. He taught us this. He taught us how to put on a sari, because who did we have to help us? But Prabhupada taught every little thing. How to brush our teeth with a twig, how to drink dabs. Even I was in Hawaii, we didn't drink coconut. We ate coconut, we had a coconut tree, but we never drank it. But Prabhupada taught us so many amazing things. It was like mystical to learn the lifestyle of what it meant to be a Krishna Bhakta. It was exciting times. 3 days later, it was time for us to return to the USA to catch our flight to Europe. The 6 of us and the baby went up to the Swami's apartment to bid him farewell and tell him about our plans for England. I am very pleased you're going to England, he said. This is very nice service. You have some contact there? Actually, no, Shamasundar said. I'm the only one who's been to London before, and I really don't know anyone there. I was only there for a little while. No matter, the Swami said. Krishna will help. When I came to America, I knew no one, and Krishna sent all of you to me. We all smiled, glowing inwardly. This was all we needed to hear before leaving. Prabhupada just knew how to empower. That whole adage that impossible is a line in a fool's dictionary, they're just flying off. They don't even know to where. Such a great adventure. Do you have any last instructions for us before we leave? I asked. Any instructions about how to introduce Krishna consciousness? Oh, we saw this part. I'm going to flick past. Okay, I know why he told us this. He told about being enthusiastic, very, very enthusiastic for Krishna. He said, I asked him for ideas on how to introduce Krishna consciousness in London, right? And then he told us about doing plays and then launched into the sequence from that silent movie. And, well, the story about the film was his answer to my question about how to spread Krishna consciousness. The guy with the ripped coattails in the film was a bit weird, but he was enthusiastic. So everyone else started copying him. So the Swami was telling us to be enthusiastic, no matter how strange Krishna consciousness might seem at first. Yes, Janaki said, that makes sense. When we do public chanting, people will definitely think we're weird. Maybe amusing if we're lucky. But that's okay. If we're enthusiastic, people will join in. Just like in the film. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they debate with you, then they accept you, Gurudas said, quoting the old dictum. We smiled at Swami's surprising way of giving us our last orders. I was thinking about that, like how Narada Muni, he was instructing King Prachinabarhishat by telling him a story about King Puranjana. So rather than say, this is what you do, they tell you the story so that you understand it through that pastime in the same way as it is done in the scriptures, and Narada Muni and all the great devotees before. Prabhupada told a story. And what was the purport? Be enthusiastic. And that's the first part of Upadeshamrita. It's saying to be confident, enthusiastic. If you look at the word enthusiastic, it's entheos, means with God. When you're enthusiastic, you're with God. You're empowered. So Prabhupada is saying like this. The streets of London, when Janaki and I arrived in Dover, the fog stroked us with its clammy hands like an unwelcoming Hitchcocky host. The immigration officer followed suit in her attitude. "What's your purpose in coming here?" she demanded. Her dark hair was pulled into a severe knot at the nape of her neck. "I write for a magazine called Back to Godhead," I said. "Do you want to see a copy?" "Let me see," she sighed and held out her hand. She flicked through the pages in a distracted manner and looked up at us, glanced at Janaki's skirt and jacket. She looks presentable and conventional, I thought, and I hoped I did too. I'd combed my hair before we'd gotten off the ferry. "Are you into Scientology?" "Who?" "Scientology. I don't know what that is." "Can I see proof of your funds?" she asked. We showed her the bank bag of notes, which was now a much more seasoned traveler than each of us. That means that bag of notes had seasoned because it had been back and forth. They were the last to go. It had been back and forth now 3 times. So that bag of money had traveled back and forth to England 3 times. She stamped her passport, and without a word, the official repeated the thud of her stamp. "Next." "Can we go?" I asked, incredulous that was all there was to it. She nodded, now fixing her eye on the elderly Italian man behind us in the line. We exited the ferry terminal and peered through the gloom to try to find a train station. "Excuse me, could you tell me where we could get a train to London?" I asked. A man holding an umbrella, he pointed right. "Head that way about 100 yards, he said. "The station is down there. You can't miss the sign." Thanks, it was such a relief to be in a country where we understood the language. Can you imagine? Srila Prabhupada, yes, he was raised in a Scottish college, but to go to a country where you don't know the language. I mean, I'm actually in that position, but I'm not. We have an infrastructure. Everything's comfortable. I'm not a big adventurer. But Prabhupada went to a foreign country, and it was not his comfort zone. Nothing about it was comfortable. The language, I remember I was trying to learn Sanskrit for a while, hopefully, and I was having such a hard time. I was in a place where no one spoke English at all. And that was the first time I ever felt loneliness, actual loneliness. I never felt alone, but when you don't understand anything, there's a sense of loneliness, or nobody's understanding you. There has to be some connection, and language connects us quite a bit. So here he is, he's happy that at least we're in a place where they're speaking English. And it says, "Our 4 days in Holland had been difficult. Most people spoke some English, but we couldn't read the signs or ingredient lists on packages. It's a very important part of being vegetarian." It is. And nowadays they hide. They're not straightforward in the ingredients on packing, the packing part of. They're calling things like plant protein that may not be. So it's very deceptive nowadays. But back then, it was more, you could really see what was in something. We caught a train and then a bus to the 3-room upstairs apartment that Shamasundar and Malati had secured during their first few days in the country. It was a South London suburb called Herne Hill, owned, they told us, by an Indian widow named Mrs. Coley. When our taxi pulled up, the both of them tumbled down the stairs to greet us and helped drag our heavy suitcases up to our new home. "We're all here now," Shamasundar exclaimed. "Finally, we're here in England. Can you believe it?" "Actually, I'm so tired, I'll believe anything right now," Janaki said. "Yes, you need to rest," Jamuna said, still vaguely maternal towards her younger sister. "Why don't you have a shower and we'll cook something for you? Then you can sleep or unpack or whatever." They showed us to our room and Janaki went to have a shower. I heard the water flowing, but when I heard her shouting, then I heard her shouting down the hall. "Hey, Malati," she called, "what's going on with the water? I'm freezing." I went into the hallway in time to see Malati heading toward the bathroom. Janaki's head was poking out the door. Here, Malati said, giving Janaki a fistful of change, to get hot water, you have to put coins into that metal box thing on the floor by the tub. Really? You're kidding. Janaki looked dubious. I thought you just said that you'd believe anything. Malati said, over the next few days, we discussed our strategy for introducing Krishna consciousness in London. We decided that we'd begin here the same way we began in San Francisco, by finding young hippies, chanting with them, and having regular programs. People would become interested, our numbers would grow, and we'd start a temple. Simple as that. The catch was that there didn't seem to be very many unconventional people around. In fact, in the first few days I was in London, all I saw was tourists and men in suits. After spending more than 2 years in the American alternative scene, England seemed heavily controlled, conservative, and undemocratic. We did a bit of asking around and found out about a place called the Arts Lab on Drury Lane in Covent Garden.
Convent.
Convent?
Convent.
Covent. Say.
It's the old name of a convent.
Okay, Covent.
Convent.
Covent. Thank you very much for that. Covent Garden. Shyamsundar was told that this was the London hub of the hippie movement, the main place where people into alternative living congregated. Top of our list of priorities was to visit the Arts Lab to make our contacts with the objective of hopefully having programs there. From Shyamsundar Prabhu's Chasing the Rhinos, London, 1966, it was the girls who kept us going, Jamuna, Malati, Janaki. Their disciplined adherence to rising and chanting and reading together on the rough sisal matting before our little altar gave each day a new energy. Continuous letters from the Swami gave us ever fresh hope. And although he worked as a well-oiled team, we each had our individual duties to keep spreading Krishna consciousness in London as fast as we could. And there was survival mode too. Each of the men had to hustle to maintain a steady minimum cash flow to pay for food, kerosene, and in my case, petrol for the truck and nappies for the baby. There's a little tiny baby. One of the things we decided we should do now was that we were in England was dress in traditional Indian Vaishnav clothing. It seemed in keeping with Swami's suggestion to be enthusiastic and upfront about being devotees, especially because Max Linder film story he told involved wearing unusual clothing. We men were more nervous about the clothing proposal than the women were. We quickly realized how many Indians and Muslims were living in London, and many of the women wore saris or burqas. Even though Yamuna, Janaki, and Malati might be the only Westerners around in saris, at least there were other women in London wearing similar garments. The Indian men in London, though, tended to dress like everyone else. They certainly didn't wear the white dhoti loincloth and shaved head on traditional Hindu monks. The British public might have been used to seeing Muslim men in their cotton robes or women in fine full burqa, but I thought that a European man with a shaved head and wearing a piece of white cloth instead of pants might be another story altogether. When the three of us emerged from the bathroom with our heads shaved clean, but for the small tuft left at the crown of by the Vaishnava priests, we were greeted with cheers. I was attached to my hair and I felt self-conscious, but Janaki gazed fondly at my bald white head. "You look beautiful," she said, and I immediately felt better. The next day I embarked on my first journey as a full-fledged, out-in-the-open devotee. I was on my way to the Arts Lab in my dhoti, my yellow turtleneck sweater, shaved head, and blazing white tilak mark on my forehead, indicating for anyone who cared to look that my body was the temple of God. As it turned out, a great many people looked. I was followed by stares as I walked to the bus stop, and a few people made double takes. I boarded the bus and made my way to the upper level with the eyes of all the passengers on me. Most were too polite to stare, but they sneaked looks at me from behind their tabloids. My head was cold. I felt like I was performing an act of surrender mixed with the hint of exhibitionism. Drury Lane, did I say it right?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to refer to you for pronunciation. Turned out to be situated in the center of the London entertainment scene. The Arts Lab was run by a couple of American guys called Jim Haynes and Jack Moore. It was a neighborhood by lots of theaters and opera houses. I intrigued Jack and Jim by the way I looked, and they quickly agreed to allow us to hold programs at the Arts Lab. The lab wasn't exactly a community because no one lived on the premises, but it nevertheless served as a central gathering place for the increasingly large number of young Londoners interested in peace, justice, vegetarianism, and left-wing political activism. The Arts Lab functioned as a center of music making, as an art gallery, and as a venue for the screening of alternative films. Occasionally, the lab also allowed blue filmmakers to shoot nudie films there. Fence sitters would be enticed to strip off for the shoot with 10-pound notes, or a bit more if they prepared to do other things. Later that week, the six of us piled into the red 1935 Ford Poplar pickup. That's an old truck. Shamasundar had purchased for next to nothing. Its cab held only two people, him and Malati, thus plus Saraswati, so the rest of us sat cross-legged in the back on the truck's wooden floor. During a torrential downpour a few days earlier, I had erected a wooden frame around the rear tray of the truck over which I hung an olive green tarpaulin. The covering hung down on the sides to protect us from the elements, but it had the effect of concentrating London's omnipresent diesel fumes. I would see that we were going to have to get used to the smell of diesel if we were going to continue traveling like this. Fortunately, it was a short ride to the Arts Lab. The place was full of people milling around the front counter and reading the large bulletin board that held announcements of gigs, gatherings, and other events in the city. Someone was selling pottery, and someone else was giving a demonstration of some kind of New Age therapy. There was a book stall where people talked together and passed joints around. The air smelled musty like cigarette smoke, incense, pot, and feet. The patrons looked pretty much like alternatives in San Francisco. They loved the chanting, even if they seemed a little bit more reserved than our American brothers and sisters. On our first night there, Jim and Jack let us chant in the main hall, which was about half the size of a basketball court. There were lots of happy faces and people singing along that night, and several even took off their shoes and danced on the carpeted floor. Our Arts Lab programs became a regular thing. Our primary venue, though, through which to get in touch with the British public. 3 times a week we drove into the city and chanted with about 100 people. After the first couple of weeks, the novelty of the programs wore off, and Jim and Jack relegated us to the smaller room upstairs, which was painted all black and was used as the lab's theater. It was always covered in cigarette butts, and we had to sweep up before each chanting session. Back to the Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. In the middle of the winter of struggle came a fortunate break for the London devotees, a meeting with George Harrison of the Beatles. For a long time, the devotees had been thinking of ways to get to the Beatles to chant Hare Krishna. To the Beatles' Apple Records studio, they had once sent an apple pie with Hare Krishna lettered on it. Another time they had sent a wind-up walking apple with the Hare Krishna mantra printed on it. They had even sent a tape of one of their kirtans and had received a standard rejection letter from Apple Records. So it seemed to be Krishna's special arrangement when Shyamasundar suddenly met one of the most sought-after celebrities in the world, George Harrison. In a crowded room at Apple Records, Shyamasundar, shaven-headed and wearing robes, sat hoping for a chance to have a few words with someone connected with the Beatles. Then George came down the stairs from a conference. As he entered the room, he saw Shyamasundar. Walking over and sitting down beside Shyamasundar, he asked, "Where have you been? I've been trying to meet the Hare Krishna people for the last couple of years." You know, it's like Prabhupada said, you act in such a way that Krishna will come see you. So they were blessed. Shyamasundar came to see him. So Shyamasundar and George talked together for an hour while everyone else hovered around. "We've really been trying to meet you people," George said. "Why don't you come to my place tomorrow?" The next day, Shyamasundar went to George's for lunch, where he met the other Beatles, Ringo Starr, John Lennon, and Paul McCartney. They all had questions, but George was especially interested. George had a copy of the Hare Krishna album with Srila Prabhupada singing Hare Krishna with the devotees. I'd had the record at least 2 years, but I got it the week it was pressed. I was open to it. You attract those things. So I used to play that a lot of the time. I was chanting the Hare Krishna mantra long before I met Shyamasundar, Guru Das, and Mukunda. I was just pleased to hear the Hare Krishna mantra, and I have a copy of the record. And I knew about Prabhupada because I had read all the linear notes in that album. Having been to India, I could tell where the devotees were all coming from, with his style of dress and shaved heads. I had seen them on the streets in Los Angeles and New York. Having read so many books and looking for yogis, my concept of the devotees wasn't like that of other people who think the devotees have all escaped from a lunatic asylum in their pajamas. No, I was aware of the thing and that it was a pretty heavy one. Much more austerities than any other group, like no coffee, chocolate, or tea. Shyamasundar continued to see George regularly, and they soon became friends. George, who had been practicing a mantra given him by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, began to hear for the first time that Bhakti Yoga and the Vedic philosophy. He talked openly to Shyamasundar, Guru Das, and Mukunda for his spiritual quest and his realizations of karma. George, a yogi I met in India, said, "You are really lucky. You have youth, fame, fortune, health, but at the same time, that's not enough for you. You want to know about something else." Most people don't even get to that point where they realize there's something beyond that wall. They're just trying to get up on top of that wall, to be able to eat, to have a nice house, to be comfortable and all that. But I was fortunate enough to get all that in time to realize that there is something else to life, whereas most people get worn out just trying to attain material things. After a visit to Haight-Ashbury in 1967, George had begun to feel guilty for his role in promulgating the LSD culture. He had had the impression that the hippies of Haight-Ashbury were creative craftsmen, but when he saw them drugged, dirty, and hopeless, a West Coast extension of the Bowery, he felt partly responsible. He decided to use his influential position by writing and singing songs about something more than psychedelics and sex. He was also feeling an increasing interest in Indian spirituality due, he felt, to karma from his previous life. George, I feel at home with Krishna. I think that's something that has been there from a previous birth. So it was like that. The door was opening to me at that time, and it was also like a jigsaw puzzle. I needed all these little pieces to make a complete picture. And that is what has been happening by the devotees, and Swami Bhaktivedanta coming along, or some devotee giving me a book, or my hearing that album. It's all been slowly fitting together. And these are some of the reasons why I responded to Shyamasundar and Guru Das when they first came to London. Let's face it, If I'm going to have to stand up and be counted, then I'll be with these guys rather than those over there. It's like that. I'll be with the devotees rather than with the straight people who are the so-called saints. George offered to help the devotees get a building in London, and he and Shyamasundar spoke of making a Hare Krishna record. But Shyamasundar never pressed him. George was the glamorous superstar and the quiet, serious Beatle, the fabulous guitarist and the singer who had access to all the greats, to presidents and queens, wherever he went. And Shyamasundar had a glamour of his own. He was tall, 6'2", and although shaven-headed, strikingly handsome. And he was a Vaishnava, fully dedicated to the Indian spirituality George was so fond of. When Prabhupada heard about George, he took seriously the possibility that George might fully take up Krishna consciousness. Carrying this to its logical conclusion, Prabhupada envisioned a world revolution in consciousness spearheaded by the Krishna-conscious Beatles. Haribo. It is understood from your letter that Mr. George Harrison has a little sympathy for our movement, and if Krishna is actually satisfied on him, surely he will be able to join us in pushing on the Sankirtan movement throughout the world. Somehow or other, the Beatles have become the cynosure of the neighboring European countries, and America also. I think I was in the 7th standard, 7th grade, and in the Ed Sullivan show, there was the first presentation of the Beatles, and they played I Want to Hold Your Hand. And the girls went mad. I never saw it. It was like a phenomenon. They just would start screaming and crying, and they fell in love. And I think partially it's really interesting because there were certain people I really loved, like Haley Mills, certain people, and turns out they're devotees. So devotees are attracted to devotees. You can't help yourself. Even though it may be the jewel of their devotion is a little covered, still you recognize something in them. So George was a favorite. Haley Mills was a favorite of mine as a youngster. He is attracted by our Sankirtan party, and if Mr. George Harrison takes the leading part in organizing a huge Sankirtan party consisting of the Beatles and our ISKCON boys, surely we shall change the face of the world. So much politically harassed by the maneuvers of the politicians. He's saying that then. Whew, what to speak of now? So many, being politically harassed by the maneuvers of the politicians. For the London devotees, George's friendship heightened the excitement of Prabhupada's coming to London. Now that a world-famous personality was waiting to meet Prabhupada, they felt perhaps they had another way to please him and to make preaching in London a success. George, by his association with Krishna consciousness and by dint of his own spiritual evolution, began to express his devotion to Lord Krishna in his songs. Reading Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is, he would appreciate the superiority of the personal conception of God over the impersonal. And many of his love songs were really about Krishna. Guru Das showed George the verse in the Gita where Krishna says that he is the basis of the impersonal Brahman. George liked the concepts of Krishna consciousness, but he was wary of showing exclusive devotion to Prabhupada and Krishna. The devotees therefore dealt with him accordingly so as not to disturb him. On January 11th, Srila Prabhupada wrote another letter to the devotees in London expressing more ideas on how George could best serve Krishna. I'm so glad that Mr. Harrison is composing songs like Lord Whom We So Long Ignored. He is very thoughtful. When we actually meet, I shall be able to give him thoughts about separation from Krishna. That was also something, that wasn't really spoken about in theological circles, how the separation of Krishna increases our desire to have his association, that separation. That was not a theological conception in other religions at all. So Prabhupada's thinking about ways in which to inspire him. The public is in need of such songs, and if they are administered through nice agents like the Beatles, it will surely be a great success. Prabhupada cautioned the devotees not to simply depend on George for help, but to try to find a building themselves and rent it. George did want to help, however, and again he suggested the devotees make a record on the Apple label. An old favorite idea of the London devotees had been to get the Beatles to make a record chanting Hare Krishna. If the Beatles did it, the mantra would certainly become world famous. George liked the idea, but he preferred that the devotees sing it and he produce it on the Apple label. You guys make the money rather than we get it, he said. Let's make a record. Jai Hari Bol. So the devotees went over to George's house for a chanting session. George dubbed in his guitar, and a few weeks later the devotees returned and heard their tape. George was ready to try a session at the studio, so the devotees agreed to meet him and his musician friend Billy Preston at Trident Studios on St. Anne's Alley. They recorded for a few hours. The tape sounded good. George and Shyamasundar agreed on a date for the actual recording. From an interview with George Harrison, Mukunda, from the very start you always felt comfortable around the devotees. George, the first time I met Shyamasundar, I liked him. He was my pal. I'd read about Prabhupada coming from India to Boston on the back of his record, and I knew that Shyamasundar and all of you were in my age group, and that the only difference really was that you'd already joined and I hadn't. I was in a rock band, so I didn't have any fear because I'd seen dhotis, your robes, and the saffron color and the shaved heads in India. Krishna consciousness was especially good for me because I didn't get the feeling that I'd have to shave my head, move into the temple, or do it full time. It was a spiritual thing that just fit in with my lifestyle. Prabhupada was preaching like that. Just add Krishna. Put the one in front of all the zeros of our life. It's all we need to do is add Krishna. So it was a spiritual thing that just fit in with my lifestyle. I could still be a musician, but I just changed my consciousness. That's all. Mukunda, you know the Tudor mansion and estate that you gave us outside London has become one of the largest international centers. How do you feel about the Bhaktivedanta Manor's success in spreading Krishna consciousness? George, oh, it's great. And it also relates to making the Hare Krishna record or whatever my involvements were. Actually, it gives me pleasure. The idea that I was fortunate enough to be able to help at that time. All those songs with spiritual themes were like little plugs, My Sweet Lord and the others. And now I know that people are much more respectful and accepting when it comes to seeing the devotees in the street and all that. It's no longer like something that's coming from left field. And I've given a lot of Prabhupada's books to many people, and whether I've heard from them again or not, it's good to know that they've gotten them, and if they've read them, their lives may be changed. Prabhupada's books are like time bombs. When you just have a book in your house, anybody, if you give them a book, you plant it in their house, there's a point. You know, I was answering the temple phone, and I'd get calls about, somebody would call, I've had this book on my shelf for years and years and years, and I took it off because I was having a conversation with someone and I started discussing the book with them. And I was thinking of giving it to them, but when I picked it off the shelf, something told me to start reading it. And it's like, and then they're saying it's changing my life. And it's just amazing you get so many testimonials like this about Prabhupada's books. They're like ticking time bombs. And when the time comes, they explode. Krishna consciousness explodes all over the place because of the placement of his books. It's so special. So when you come across people who are spiritually inclined but don't have much knowledge, what kind of advice do you give them? Mukunda asked George. I try to tell them my little bit, what my experience is, and I give them a choice of things to read and a choice of places to go, like, go to the temple, try chanting. End of the interview. On the day of the recording, about a dozen devotees, including some newly recruited Britishers, assembled at EMI Recording Studios on Abbey Road. When the first group of devotees arrived at George's Mercedes, a crowd of teenagers began singing Hare Krishna to the tune popularized by the rock musical Hair. While Jamuna applied Vaishnav tilak to the foreheads of the recording technicians, Malati began unpacking the picnic baskets of prasadam she had brought, and some of the other devotees put up pictures of Krishna and lit incense. The studio was Krishnized. Suddenly it's transformed. With Paul McCartney and his wife Linda operating the control console, the recording session began. Everyone worked quickly making side one of the 45 RPM record in about an hour. George played the organ, Mukunda played the mridanga, Jamuna sang the lead with Shamasundar backing her, and the other voices blended in a chorus. And to make it come out exactly right, everyone concentrated on Prabhupada and prayed for spiritual strength. Isn't that the formula? You just pray for the mercy of the spiritual master. It's a formula for success. On the fourth take, everything went smoothly, with Malati spontaneously hitting a brass gong at the end. Then they recorded the flip side of the record, prayers to Srila Prabhupada, Lord Chaitanya and his associates, and the 6 Goswamis. Afterward, George dubbed in the brass guitar and other voices. The devotees, engineers, and everyone felt good about it. This is going to be big, George promised. As the record went into production, the devotees returned to their regular work, still living separately. Prabhupada set the time of his arrival for early September. We would go to Hamburg. Is that the right way? Hamburg. And then come to London. He said even if there was no temple. Miraculously, only 2 months before Prabhupada's arrival, things began to come together. Ki Jai. Guru Das met a real estate agent with the building on Bury Place near the British Museum. The devotees could move in immediately. An ideal location, 41 pounds a week, and immediate occupancy. It was wonderful. Mukunda wrote Prabhupada asking him for money for the down payment. Prabhupada agreed. Shamasundar got a letter from George on Apple Corporation Ltd. Stationery stating that Apple would guarantee payments if the devotees defaulted. Ooh, they got a backer. How wonderful. Within a week, the devotees had a 5-story building in central London. Wow. When the devotees went to live at their new center on Bury Place, city officials said that they did not have the proper housing permits. The red tape could take weeks, even months. Again, the devotees were without a place to live and worship together. Shamasundar, however, on faith that everything would work out, began constructing a temple room in California Redwood in the building. John Lennon then suggested to Shamasundar that the devotees come and live with him at Tittenhurst, a large estate that he had recently purchased near Ascot. He needed some renovation done, and if the devotees would help, he would give them a place to live. Can our guru also stay here? Shamasundar asked. John agreed, and the devotees moved into the former servants' quarters at John's estate. Only a few weeks before Prabhupada's arrival, the record Hare Krishna mantra was released. Apple Records staged a promotion and brought press reports and photographers in a multicolored bus to a blue and white pavilion where the devotees had gathered with George. The first day, the record sold 70,000 copies. Wow, within a few weeks, the devotees appeared on the popular TV show Top of the Pops, singing their song. John Lennon's estate, formerly owned by the Cadbury family, consisted of 76 acres of lawn and forest, with a large manor and many smaller buildings. John and his wife Yoko lived in the manor. The servants' quarters where Prabhupada and the devotees were, to live were 4 separate apartments in a single narrow building near the manor. About 15 devotees moved in, reserving 1 apartment for Prabhupada and his servant. John wanted the devotees to tear out the hardwood floors in the main house and replace them with new walls and black and white marble tile floors. While this renovation was beginning, Ishana, who had recently arrived from Canada, began with a few helpers to convert the old music recital hall into a temple complete with Vyasasan for Srila Prabhupada. The devotees worked day and night on Prabhupada's quarters, the temple room, and Prabhupada's Vyasasan. With such energy did they work that John and Yoko could see that the devotees were obviously in love with their spiritual master. London, a dream fulfilled, September 11th, 1969, with the cooperation of Apple Records and Lufthansa. German Airlines, the devotees arranged a reception for Prabhupada at London's Heathrow Airport. As soon as Prabhupada descended the stairs of the airplane, he was escorted to a car and driven to a VIP lounge, bypassing the formalities of immigration and customs. As Prabhupada stepped off from the car, the devotees ran out of the terminal and offered obeisances on the wet pavement. While Srila Prabhupada looked down at them smiling, the devotees rose, brushing wet macadam from their dhotis and saris, and joyfully surrounded Prabhupada as he entered the lounge. Inside the terminal, Prabhupada confronted a mass of reporters and cameramen and several dozen friends of the devotees. A clean cloth covered one of the sofa lounges, and a vase of yellow gladiolas sat on either side. Prabhupada walked over to the sofa and sat down, and Shyamasundar garlanded him with red and white carnations. Prabhupada began leading kirtan. Jai Srila Prabhupada. The devotees were oblivious to all but Srila Prabhupada, and the reporters resigned themselves to simply standing and observing while the devotees sang and danced ecstatically. The eager devotees were unabashed during the kirtan, and their shouts of Haribo and Jai Prabhupada, as well as blasts from the conch shell, punctuated the regular chanting of Hare Krishna. After the kirtan, the reporters remained at a distance as Prabhupada spoke affectionately to almost each devotee seated before him. "Where is Janaki?" he asked. "Oh yes, how are you, Vaibhavati? How is your daughter? Actually, you are all my fathers and mothers. You are taking such care." Prabhupada was so affectionate. For the devotees, only they and Prabhupada were present in the lounge, and they strained to catch everything he did or said. They couldn't have cared less about any outsider's reactions. Finally, Mukunda invited the reporters to come forward. Any of you gentlemen have any questions? You can ask them of Prabhupada. We only have a couple of minutes, so I'm going to say Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Add something.
Yes, please.
At the equivalent of 4:30 in India, the buried place building was officially given over to ISKCON.
Wonderful. So this just happened?
Yes, today.
Today! Haribo! Jai! So at 4:30 today, Bury Place was just given... Bury Place was just given over to ISKCON.
Yes.
Wonderful. So it's a Prabhupada Memorial Tirtha back. So
lots of Prabhupada disciples were there today.
Oh, that's fabulous. That is very, very good news. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada.